Hey everyone, Austin here again. We're continuing this How I Make My Videos series, which is sort of an off-the-cuff series where I show you guys and talk about sort of the behind the scenes on my channel. So this episode, we're going to focus on my actual physical real-world hardware and recording setup. So in the previous episodes, I showed you the photo editing software I use in order to create thumbnails. I showed you the software aspect of recording my gameplay, the audio editing, as well as the actual video editing itself when it comes to strictly my Let's Plays. So again, this episode we're going to focus on the real hardware. We're going to show you how I actually connect things into my desktop setup in order to actually capture them. But it's not just as simple as that. There's a couple of other things I have to do here. I have to extract the audio out in order to be able to monitor it. I also have various splitter boxes and amplification boxes which let me display my footage on multiple displays. I have upscalers and so on and so on. And my console setup itself is a little unconventional as well. So if you guys missed those first two episodes and that interests you, I'll probably have some links in the description box below. And just remember that this is an off-the-cuff series, so it's not scripted. They're going to be a little long-winded and whatnot. If you got the time for them, great. If you don't, I don't blame you. But for those of you guys that do, and you do want to watch this sort of thing, I hope you guys find some value in it. And I hope you guys have been enjoying them up to this point. We will be doing an episode 4, which is going to go over my actual stream setup. And I'm going to sort of show you guys how I stream through OBS and whatnot. It might be a good little tutorial video for people looking to get into streaming for the first time. So, alright, starting off, we're going to start off pretty boring here. In the corner of my game room, I basically have my workspace area. I have two desks. My main desk on the right, this is where my desktop is hooked up and set up. I basically have two computer monitors. Having two monitors is fantastic for just workflow. If you're doing a lot of creative stuff on a computer, I highly recommend having a second monitor. If you don't, it's just fantastic. These are HP Pavilion 23-inch monitors, nothing too special here. I actually picked them up because they looked nice and the price was right. And they've treated me pretty well for the most part in the last 2 years I've had them. I also have a third monitor, which is actually mounted up in the air. It's an Asus monitor. I don't remember the actual model number, but it's also a 23-ish inch monitor with very low response time, which is great. This is actually where I monitor my gameplay footage. On the left-hand side, I have another desk, which is basically where I put my game consoles when I'm recording them. So there's enough space for one console usually. And I also have a Sony professional video monitor there, which I can use for previewing as well. And I also have my scalers and line doublers, which is an XRGB mini framemeister and an OSSC. And I'll touch more on those later. For those of you guys curious about my actual computer build, I actually built this about a year ago. It's an AMD Ryzen 7 1700X processor, which I believe is about 3.4 gigahertz out of the box. It's an 8-core, 16-thread CPU, and while it's not the beefiest thing in existence compared to, say, Intel's top-of-the-line stuff, it is a multitasking monster. It is just amazing for that stuff. I have 32 gigs of RAM in here. I have a Radeon RX 580 graphics card, which has got 8 gigs of RAM on it as well. And I also actually have a Creative Labs Sound Blaster ZX sound card. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that it basically has a dongle that comes out of the sound card that sits on my desk, and it allows me to monitor PC game audio. And I also use it when I am actually editing stuff on my computer or just trying to enjoy some games, solo. And it's got a volume knob on it. So it's a really great little device to have for ease of use scenarios. Alright, so the next thing we're going to talk about is my game console setup. And I have kind of an unconventional setup here when it comes to this stuff. And none of my game consoles are actually hooked up in the game room here. What I do is I store all the AV cables and power supplies separately in bins. And the console I want to record or stream, I just take it, I set it on my side desk where my PVM is, and I grab the AV connectors and power supplies. So I have one box just for power cables and whatnot. And then I grab the AV cable, be it whether it's composite or S-video or RGB. I have one little box just for composite cables, which I actually don't use that often anymore. And then I have another set of bins for my S-video cables and my various RGB Euro SCART cables. So say if I wanted to do Super Nintendo, I would grab my Super Nintendo, I would put it on the desk, and then I'd grab the power cable and the RGB cable and then just hook it up. So I have a power strip on that desk where I run my consoles into and other accessories, and then I have my upscalers and whatnot, which I plug the RGB cable into, and then I'm ready to go. It's actually a very quick and easy process. It actually keeps things relatively clean here. And the reason I do this is that I originally really wanted to be able to move my consoles from room to room. I didn't want to be tethered to one setup because I have multiple stream setups. I'm only going to be talking about this one setup here, but I have multiple stream setups in the apartment, and I like to be able to move my consoles from setup to setup depending on the mood I'm in. However, when you're tethered to a very specific setup, it makes it very difficult to do that. And what I was doing for a little while is, in order to, say, bring my Super Nintendo out to the main room, I either bought a second Super Nintendo or I bought a second set of AV and power cables, and all that just started to get really expensive really quickly. And by not having anything hooked up permanently, all I have to do is just grab the console, bring it where I want, and then just bring the power cord and AV cable with me. It's not hard. This actually works out really well for my recording and streaming overall. I don't have to deal with switch boxes anymore. I don't have to deal with getting behind the entertainment center and dealing with, you know, jumbled, tangled cable sets and whatnot, because I have 20 systems hooked up. So next up, guys, let's talk about some audio stuff real quick. So we're going to talk about my microphones and things like that. So my main microphone that you hear me talking into right now is an Audio-Technica AT2035. I think it's a 2035. It could be a 2045. It's a condenser microphone that uses an XLR connection on the bottom of it. It actually comes with this shock mount, which is pretty nice. So that was a nice little bonus when I got it. That runs into a analog to digital converter box. So it's an M-Audio M-Track. The M-Track can actually be used for music instruments as well. Say if you're a guitarist or something like that. I mainly just have it for my microphones. When I get lazy, sometimes I don't want to use this mic setup though. You know, say if I'm in a different room on a different stream setup, I might want something a little bit easier. I don't want to be disconnecting my M-Track, and I don't want to be moving this condenser mic into other rooms like I used to. So what I do for that is I also have a Blue Yeti Blackout Edition USB microphone. So this is a pretty nice microphone as well. Not nearly as nice as my Audio-Technica, but for lazy recordings or live streams, mainly on Twitch, it really gets the job done. The downside to the Blue Yeti is that it picks up a ton of background noise no matter what setting you've got it configured to. So there is that. But when I'm still streaming out in the main room, or if I'm doing, say, pinball streams, I do have another microphone. It's a Blue Snowball. And the Blue Snowball is a tier below the Yeti, but it's still a fantastic entry-level microphone. These usually cost about $50 or so. And it's just a really solid little mic. If you're trying to get into podcasting or doing basic audio like vocal recordings or whatever for, you know, commentary or things like that, I highly recommend the Blue Snowball. It's a fantastic little mic, and it comes with its own little built-in stand as well. So moving on from audio stuff, we're going to talk about my actual capture setup a little bit. So my capture card itself, I touched on this on the previous episode. It's an Elgato Game Capture HD60 Pro. It's an internalized PCI Express capture card. It does HDMI only. So it does HDMI in, and then it has a pass-through which will feed HDMI back out to your display, so you can basically play your gameplay, you know, relatively lag-free. Now, because I do upscaling, this HDMI only solution is not a problem. Basically, my XRGB Mini, framemeister, and my OSSC, these are both, I guess, scaling devices. Technically, the framemeister is an actual upscaler. The OSSC uses a technique called line doubling. We're not going to get into really the differences here, but I have two devices that do very similar things, and the reason is that I actually bought an OSSC just recently because I wanted a backup for my framemeister, and it's turned out that I have started to end up using both in my chain here, not together in conjunction. I'll use the framemeister or the OSSC depending on the situation that I'm in. So basically, these devices will take my analog inputs from my game consoles, and then they will run into my capture card, and then my capture card will feed that back out to my HD display. That was kind of long-winded, but basically I'll run my systems into either of those, and those will actually go through my PVM. The great thing about having a PVM is that it has a pass-through on it. So you can do RGB in or S-Video in or whatever, and then it'll just feed those same signals back out. So I actually run everything into my PVM first, and then that feeds everything back out to my scalers. So now from there, if I'm doing S-Video or composite, what I have is a composite and S-Video amplifier, and that's actually mounted on the left-hand wall. What's great about this little box is that when I'm doing composite or S-Video, I can display out to 4 different destinations. So I actually have the input on the top, and then that splits out one line to my consumer Trinitron on the other side of the game room. Another one splits out into my framemeister, and another one splits out into my PVM. That way I can go into the PVM and the framemeister at the same time and not have to use the PVM's pass-through function. And I have another one actually going out to a separate soundbar in the game room, so I can actually just monitor game audio if I'm just working on different things around the room. So these amplification boxes are really nice to have, especially if you're having problems with input lag on a modern HD display. You can use an amplification box like this to send one signal into your capture card and then send another signal into a CRT nearby, so you can monitor the gameplay on that CRT and play on that, and not have to worry about input lag and stuff like that, which you will if you're going to be monitoring on your HD display. So speaking of amplifiers, splitters, and extractors, I actually have a couple of other things in this chain here in order to monitor gameplay audio. So things can get a little complex here when you're using HD displays to monitor your gameplay footage. So the problem I have here is my Asus monitor that sits above my 2 HP desktop monitors is that it doesn't have a headphone jack on it. So there's no way to monitor game audio from the monitor itself, which is kind of a big oversight on Asus's part, in my opinion. My previous Asus monitor, which actually kind of took a crap, did have a headphone port on it, which simplified my chain a little bit further. But this one does not. So in order to actually hear the gameplay as I'm playing it from my capture card, I have to have a HDMI audio extractor coming, basically interrupting the chain from the capture card to my HD display. So I have a Blue Sky HDMI to HDMI audio converter, which you can find on Amazon for 20 or 25 bucks or something like that. And what this does is it splits the audio out via 2 analog RCA stereo jacks. But that's not it. I can't plug headphones into that. Even if I could, I couldn't adjust the volume or anything like that if it actually worked. So for that, I have yet another box. It's a Saiba SD-DAC 63093 headphone amplifier and splitter box. This is a really small box. It's actually come in handy quite a bit for the last couple of years since I've been doing this. And so the RCA path from the HDMI audio extractor runs into the headphone amplifier, and it'll basically convert it to 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, which is great. But it also has a volume control on it. So the big thing is not that it's just going to, a compatible headphone jack, but that it's got volume control. So I can turn the volume up, I can turn it down. If it gets too loud, I can fine tune it. And that just makes life a whole lot easier on me when I'm doing these recordings and live streams. The benefit to this Saiba box is that not only do I have volume control, but it also has a second port. So if one port dies, I have another backup port I can use. I always think of redundancy, but another benefit is that if I have a guest here that's streaming with me or recording a video with me, we can both use our own pair of headphones and monitor the game audio individually. You don't want to have game audio playing through speakers when you're recording, because the microphone will pick that up. So you always want to be monitoring with headphones and not through live speakers. So I have a couple of other things here. I've got a power strip on my left-hand desk, which I have to run these devices into. So my extractors are all actually powered. So I basically have them all connected into one extension cable, and then that one extension cable runs into this switch box on my left-hand desk. I just leave it switched off at all times until I need it on, and then they power on and they start functioning and whatnot. I also have a Logitech webcam. It's a C920. It's a pretty basic HD webcam. It does 30 frames a second at 1080p. It's not exactly cutting edge these days, but it is a good, reliable, solid webcam. So if you're looking into getting into recording and you don't want to use a camcorder and you just want to use a webcam, then pick one of these up. So I don't use this for actual recording. I use it just for live streams, mainly on Twitch. I don't really use it on YouTube. It is something else I wanted to mention as well. So that's pretty much it, guys. If you have any questions or comments, definitely be sure to post a comment down below. Also, we're going to be back with a part 4 sometime soon, where I'm going to basically go over my stream setup, and I'm going to be configuring a stream live for you on the spot, so you can kind of see how that works. I'll talk about the various commands you can use and functionality you can use in order to set up a stream for the first time. And that'll probably wrap up this series. I can't think of too many other things to talk about in the series outside of 4 parts. I think 4 parts is probably going to do it, unless you guys have something else very specific you want me to talk about. But I haven't had any feedback like that in these yet, so I assume you guys are perfectly fine with how these have been turning out so far. And you know, if there's nothing else you guys want to see, then that's cool. I'm glad I was able to do this anyway. You know, this again stemmed from a feedback video about a year ago, where a few of you folks asked to see my actual recording setup and how that works. And so I kind of just took it one step further, and I just showed you guys a whole bunch of the behind the scenes process. And so I hope you guys enjoyed that. So that's going to do it for me, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. And until then, take it easy.